Snow was falling hard the day an 11-year-old boy walked alone down a frozen Minneapolis street, clutching his fallen father's dog tags and hiding a fresh bruise under his hat. He stopped at a small house with an American flag and a sign that read, U.S. Army Veteran, took a shaky breath, and knocked. When the door opened, he looked up at a battle-scarred soldier, a gentle mom, a wide-eyed 6-year-old boy, and a German shepherd, and whispered, "Can you be my dad, just for one day?" Chapter 1. The Boy in the Snow and the Stranger's Door. Winter pressed down on Minneapolis, low and gray, while snow scraped along the sidewalks in restless waves. Ethan Miller, 11 years old and too small for the weight he carried, trudged through the cold with his shoulders hunched, his thin navy jacket doing almost nothing against the wind. The zipper jammed halfway up let icy air lick at his faded superhero t-shirt. His once bright red beanie had dulled to a tired maroon and sagged crookedly over his forehead, failing to hide the swelling purple bruise around his left eye. His sneakers were cracked at the soles. Each step let in a sting of slush that made his toes burn before they went numb. In his right hand, he clutched a silver chain with 2 worn dog tags. The edges were smooth from years of rubbing, the letters faint but still there. Staff Sergeant James Miller, his father's name. Sometimes the tags felt like armor, proof that he belonged to someone brave. Most days they felt like an anchor, dragging his eyes to the floor whenever someone noticed them. Kids like Logan Hart, for example. Logan was everything Ethan was not. Tall, broad-shouldered for 12, sandy blonde hair trimmed like it had a standing appointment, hazel eyes that sparkled when teachers looked and hardened like glass when they turned away. His jacket had a logo Ethan had only seen in ads. His sneakers were spotless white, his confidence loud and easy. Adults called him a natural leader. Ethan had learned to call him something else in his head. Logan never walked alone. Tyler trailed at one elbow, short and stocky, with freckles and a laugh that turned nasty when someone weaker was around. On the other side drifted Mason, taller and skinny, acne dotted across his cheeks, fingers always twitching to shove or pull or grab. They orbited Logan like planets around a sun that burned cold. The first time Logan shoved Ethan into the lockers and called him trash boy, Ethan had tried to brush it off, cheeks burning, forcing a thin smile like it didn't matter. The second time, Logan hooked a finger under Ethan's dog tags and yanked, letting them swing between them. "Your dad died for this junk?" he'd sneered, then dropped them into a gray puddle by the curb. Ethan remembered the sting of icy water soaking his jeans as he knelt, fingers numb, fishing through grit and cigarette butts while laughter bounced off brick walls. Since then, the tags never left his grip. That morning, when Mrs. Hanson had stood in front of the class in her burgundy sweater and announced, "Next Friday is career day. Your parents can come talk about their jobs," the room had exploded with chatter. Mrs. Hanson had kind brown eyes and creases of weariness around her mouth, the look of someone who wanted to help and knew she couldn't fix everything. Logan's hand shot up. "My dad's a corporate lawyer," he said, raising his chin. "He wins big cases. He'll come in, his best suit, so everyone can see what success looks like." A few kids laughed approvingly. Ethan focused on an old scratch in his desktop. His father's job existed only on a funeral program hidden in a drawer. U.S. Army, killed in action. His mother, Rachel, worked nights at the hospital. She was slim, her once lively auburn hair now living permanently in a messy bun, green eyes dulled by lack of sleep. She always smelled faintly of antiseptic and cheap coffee, always rushed, always apologizing when she left him at home with Todd. "One day, it'll be better," she'd whisper. "Just hold on, okay?" But one day never showed up. Todd Harris had moved into their apartment 2 years earlier, all easy charm and strong arms, thick black hair, a shadow of stubble that made him look like the rugged men on TV. At first he brought flowers for Rachel and high-fived Ethan, calling him little man. When job interviews fell through and bills piled up, the charm cracked. Beer cans appeared, then multiplied. The TV got louder. Jokes got sharper. Ethan became expert at reading tiny signs. The way Todd's fingers tightened around a can, the shift in his jaw, the slight slur that meant the evening was sliding toward danger. 2 nights earlier, it had slipped faster than Ethan could move. A half-empty beer can perched on the edge of the coffee table tipped. Ethan lunged, fingers brushing cold aluminum just as it fell into the carpet. Todd shot up, face darkening. "You useless little—" The punch came before Ethan could flinch. a burst of pain and white light. He heard his mother crying out, then the slam of a bedroom door. Later, with a bag of frozen peas pressed to his eye, Ethan stared at the ceiling and tried to count all the ways he could have done better. If he'd been quicker, quieter, smaller, less visible, the word useless latched onto him and refused to let go. The next morning, Mrs. Hanson had paused at his desk, gaze lingering on the bruise. "Bike," he lied quickly. "I fell." She looked like she didn't believe him, but wrote something on a clipboard and let it go. Now, trudging through the cold, he pictured career day. Logan's dad in a sharp suit, Tyler's mom in a white coat, Mason's dad talking about tech in offices with glass walls, and him, alone. He turned onto a quieter street lined with modest houses, their roofs heavy with snow. Soft white lights glowed on porches, reflecting in icicles. At the end of the block, a small gray house with white trim made him stop. An American flag hung from the porch, its colors muted. Beside the door, a wooden plaque read, U.S. Army Veteran. The words tugged at something in his chest. He pictured his father in uniform, the photo his mother kept in a box, broad shoulders, shy smile, Rachel younger and radiant at his side. "Your dad had brothers in the army," she used to say, "men who'd have done anything for him." Ethan stared at the plaque and wondered, if one of those men, or someone like them, lived here, the idea that this stranger might care about a boy who shared his uniform's title felt ridiculous. Adults had their own problems. Why would they want his? Another thought came, sharper and quieter. If you don't ask, nothing will change. Friday will come, and you'll be alone under those fluorescent lights. Before he could think himself out of it, Ethan walked up the cleared path, climbed the 3 wooden steps, and stood at the door. Scratches at the bottom told of a dog with big paws and bigger opinions. His heart thumped against his ribs. He thought of Todd's rage if he found out, of Logan's laughter if this ended in humiliation, of his father's honest eyes in that faded photograph. "What would you do?" he whispered to the dog tags. They clicked softly in his fist. He knocked. The sound seemed small against the storm. He knocked again, harder. From inside came a deep, commanding bark and the clatter of claws on hardwood. The lock clicked. The door opened into a wash of yellow light and the smell of something cooking. Onions, garlic, warmth. A large German shepherd filled the doorway first, black and tan coat glossy, amber eyes locked on his face. The dog's ears stood tall, body tight, a low growl humming in his chest. Behind him stood a man, tall and solid, with dark brown hair cropped in a no-nonsense cut, just beginning to gray at the temples. His square face was weathered, olive skin and nicked by a pale scar that traced his jaw into a neatly trimmed beard. His eyes were a clear, cold blue, alert and measuring. He took in the bruise under Ethan's beanie, the thin jacket, the wet shoes, the dog tags clenched in a trembling hand. For a long heartbeat, no one spoke. Snowflakes drifted past the porch light behind Ethan. The dog's growl vibrated between them. Finally, the man said, his voice deep and guarded, "You lost, kid?" Ethan swallowed. Every instinct screamed at him to run. Instead, he forced his chin up a fraction and met those blue eyes. "No, sir," he said, voice shaking. I came here on purpose." The man's brows knit. "On purpose?" Ethan's fingers tightened on the tags until they dug into his skin. "There's this thing at school," he whispered. "Career day. Everyone's bringing their dad or mom. I don't have anyone." The admission left him feeling naked on the porch. The man's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Ethan sucked in a breath that shuddered at the edges. "Can you be my dad?" he forced out. "Just for one day." The words hung between them, fragile and enormous. Max's growl climbed, sharper, sensing the hurt behind the voice. The German shepherd surged forward, muscles bunching, teeth flashing white, as he lunged toward the edge of the porch. And Ethan flinched, heart slamming, the world narrowing to fangs, firelight spilling from the house, and the roaring in his own ears. Chapter 2. The Veteran's Home and the Bruised Child. "Stay." The command snapped through the air like a shot. The German shepherd froze mid-lunge, claws screeching slightly on the wood as he stopped himself. He let out one last warning growl, then stepped back half a pace, eyes still fixed on Ethan. The man's hand rested on the dog's thick neck. "Good boy, Max," he murmured, then looked back at the shivering boy on his porch. "He's doing his job." He won't hurt you." His voice had lost some of its edge, replaced by a quieter concern. "I'm Daniel," he said. "Daniel Walker. You must be Ethan." It took Ethan a second to realize he must have read the name on the dog tags. He nodded, throat tight. Yes, sir." Daniel stepped back from the door, pulling Max with him. Warm air rolled out, fire, food, something sweet underneath. "Come in, Ethan," he said. "You're turning blue out there." Crossing that threshold felt like stepping into another world. The house was modest but warm, cream walls glowing in lamplight. The living room held a worn brown couch, a sturdy coffee table with nicks along its edges, and a stone fireplace where flames cast shifting patterns on a woven rug. On the walls hung photos. Daniel in desert fatigues with other soldiers, Daniel in a simple suit at a small wedding, his arm around a laughing woman in white, a younger Max licking the face of a toddler who squealed with delight. "Danny, who is it?" a woman's voice called from down the hall. She appeared moments later, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She was in her early 30s, medium height, with shoulder-length brown hair pulled back in a low ponytail, and a few strands curling against her fair, freckled cheeks. Her blue eyes were clear and sharp, but soft at the edges, the look of someone who had spent many nights in fluorescent hospital corridors. She wore navy sweatpants and a gray hoodie with a hospital logo. Her gaze slid over Ethan's thin jacket, wet jeans, and the ring of purple around his eye. Concern flickered in her face. "Hey there," she said gently. "I'm Emily. You look frozen. Come sit by the fire." Before Ethan could move, a small head peeked around the hallway corner. A boy, about 6, in dinosaur pajamas and mismatched socks, clutching a chipped superhero figure. His brown hair stuck up at odd angles, and his hazel eyes were round with curiosity. "Is he a soldier?" the boy asked bluntly, looking at the dog tags. "Or a kid of a soldier?" Daniel's lips twitched. "This is Ethan," he said. "He's our guest, Noah. What do we do with guests?" "We share snacks," Noah said promptly, padding closer, "and we don't bug them too much." He smiled, small and shy. "Hi." "Hi," Ethan whispered. His voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. Daniel nudged him toward the couch. "Sit," he said. "You can keep your shoes on." He disappeared briefly and returned with a thick navy blanket, the kind you'd see in a barracks. He draped it over Ethan's shoulders with careful hands, as if checking not to touch anywhere that might hurt. Max lay down near Daniel's feet, positioning his body so he could watch both Ethan and the rest of the room. Emily vanished and came back with a steaming mug. "Hot chocolate," she said. "Real stuff, not the packet kind." Tiny marshmallows floated on top. Ethan wrapped his fingers around the mug and felt warmth seep into his hands, up his arms, into the hollow space in his chest. For a moment, he just stared at it, not quite believing it was for him. The fire crackled. Noah made swooshing noises as his toy superhero flew over the rug. Daniel leaned against the wall, arms crossed, watching Ethan with the same alertness he'd used on the porch, but something gentler beneath it now. "So," Daniel said after Ethan had taken a few careful sips, "career day." Ethan nodded, staring into the cocoa as he talked. He said the basics, parents coming in, Logan bragging about his lawyer dad, his own father dying overseas. He mentioned his mother working nights. He did not say, "I'm scared every time she leaves," but it felt like his shaking hands might have said it for him. When he reached Todd, his voice thinned. "Mom's boyfriend," he muttered. "He gets mad a lot." Emily, who had seen more than her share of mad a lot come through the ER, tilted her head. "Did he give you that bruise?" she asked softly. The lie hovered at Ethan's lips, bike, fall, clumsy, ready to protect him and trap him at the same time. He looked at Max, at Noah humming on the floor, at Daniel's steady gaze, at Emily's worried eyes. The warmth of the blanket was too much. It loosened something. "Yes," he whispered. The word felt huge. "He hit me." Emily's face tightened, but she didn't gasp or rush in. "Does he hit you often?" she asked. "Only when I mess up," Ethan blurted, then flushed. "When I forget stuff, when I talk during the game, when I'm noisy." Saying it out loud made it sound even worse, like reading a list of reasons he deserved it. Daniel glanced at Emily. There was a whole conversation in that look. Memories of villages, checkpoints, hospital wards, kids hiding behind adults who hurt them. "Okay," Daniel said finally. His voice was calm, like he was laying out a plan before a mission. First thing, Friday, 9 o'clock, room 207, Ethan murmured. Room 207, Daniel repeated. I'll be there. I'll talk about my time in the army. If your teacher says yes, Emily can come. Noah too, if they allow little guys. Noah's head popped up. I'll bring my superhero, he announced, and tell them he saves kids. Like you, he added to Ethan, utterly serious. Something in Ethan's chest squeezed. This promise felt different from the ones he was used to. He believed, against his own instincts, that Daniel would actually show up. But career day, Daniel went on, is just one morning. It doesn't fix home. Fear crawled back under Ethan's skin. Are you going to call people? Take me away from my mom? Emily leaned forward, careful to give him space. We want you safe, she said, and we want your mom safe. Sometimes that means talking to the school counselor, the nurse, maybe a social worker, people who can watch, people Todd can't scare as easily. Daniel nodded. I know folks at the VA too, he said. We'll move slow and smart. No one's dragging you anywhere tonight, but we're also not pretending we didn't hear about that bruise. Ethan looked at the fire, at Max's paws, at his own hands around the mug. Trust was dangerous, but so was going back to that apartment with no one knowing. He tightened his grip on the dog tags under the blanket. Okay, he said quietly. Just, please don't leave me alone with him if he gets worse. Daniel's answer came without hesitation. You knocked on my door, he said. That makes you my responsibility now. I don't walk away from that. Somewhere across town, in a dim apartment flickering with TV light, Todd cracked open another beer. He picked up Ethan's hoodie from the back of a chair, sniffed, and frowned at the faint scent of cocoa and unfamiliar detergent. Annoyance sharpened into suspicion. While Ethan sat wrapped in a veteran's blanket and the first fragile strand of hope, a different kind of storm was already thickening above his real home, waiting to break. Chapter 3. Career Day and the Soldier in the Winter Classroom. On the morning of Career Day, the sky over Minneapolis looked like a dirty sheet of ice, heavy and colorless, with snow still drifting down in small, stubborn flakes. Ethan woke long before his alarm, staring at the cracked ceiling, replaying Daniel's promise in his head. Room 207, 9 o'clock, I'll be there. And, right behind it, the old, heavier thought that adults often meant well and still didn't show up. He dressed slowly, choosing his least faded jeans and the one t-shirt without holes, pulling on his hoodie and tugging his beanie low to soften the yellow bruise around his eye. The dog tags were last. The cold metal against his skin was half comfort, half ache. In the kitchen, Rachel stood in wrinkled blue scrubs, hair in its usual messy bun, both hands wrapped around a travel mug. Her green eyes were bloodshot, her shoulders slumped in that particular way that meant the hospital had eaten what little rest she'd had. Big day, she said, forcing a smile. Ethan shrugged. Yeah. She started to apologize. They were short-staffed. The shift couldn't be changed. The request was too late. But he cut in quickly, the way he always did when her guilt began to swell. It's okay, Mom. It's just school. She stepped closer, fingers brushing his cheek and flinching when she hit the edge of the bruise. Anger flared in her eyes and then sank, smothered by exhaustion. She kissed his forehead. Text me how it goes, please. On the couch, Todd lay under a rumpled blanket, stubble dark on his jaw, eyes half closed, the smell of stale beer hanging over him. He didn't say goodbye. At school, the hallways were louder than usual. Parents in coats and suits followed their kids, laughing, checking phones, adjusting ties. In room 207, desks had been pushed slightly aside to create a space at the front. Posters of planets and grammar rules shared wall space with a crooked American flag. Ethan slid into a chair at the back, fingers wrapped so tightly around his dog tags they bit into his palm. Mrs. Hanson, in a soft green cardigan, moved between desks, greeting parents. Her kind eyes kept flicking toward the door. Logan arrived with his father, and somehow managed to walk even taller than usual. Mark Hart was a grown version of his son. Tall, broad-shouldered, sandy hair precisely cut, hazel eyes sharp. He wore a charcoal suit that fit like it had been tailored just for him, a pale shirt, a neat navy tie. His handshake with Mrs. Hanson was firm, his smile impeccable, the kind that had been practiced in mirrors and boardrooms. When his gaze skimmed past Ethan, taking in the worn hoodie and beanie, the bruise, his expression didn't change, but something in his eyes coolly dismissed him. Mark Hart, He introduced himself to the room a few minutes later. Corporate litigation. That means I'm a lawyer who helps big companies fight their battles in court. He talked about cases and billable hours, about sleek downtown offices and clients who flew him to New York. The words Tesla, penthouse, and bonus slipped in as if by accident. The class was impressed. Logan practically glowed. Ethan watched the clock over the whiteboard. 8:53, 8:57. His heart hammered harder with each passing minute. It would be so easy for something to have gone wrong. A sick kid, a snowed-in car, second thoughts. 9 came and went. Mrs. Hanson thanked Mr. Hart to a round of applause. Before she could announce the next parent, a low engine growl filtered in from outside, deeper than the hum of ordinary cars. A few kids turned toward the windows. Faintly, a dog barked. A big dog, not a yappy one. A moment later, someone knocked on the classroom door. "Come in," Mrs. Hanson called. The door opened, and Daniel Walker stepped inside, snow dusting the shoulders of his heavy winter coat. He had unzipped it, revealing a faded Army combat shirt beneath, name tape over his chest, a frayed patch on his sleeve. His dark hair was tidier than the night Ethan met him, the early gray at his temples more visible under fluorescent lights. The faint scar along his jaw caught the light above his neat stubble. Beside him walked Emily in dark jeans and a soft blue sweater, her hospital badge clipped at her hip, and Noah in clean sneakers and a superhero t-shirt under his hoodie, clutching Max's leash with both hands. Max padded into the room as though he'd done this 100 times. Black and tan coat glossy, amber eyes alert, a simple working harness snug across his chest. A ripple went through the room, gasps, delighted whispers, a few squeaks of, "Can we pet him?" Ethan sat very still, blood rushing in his ears. He came. That thought rang louder than the classroom noise. Relief flooded him so fast it made his eyes sting. Mrs. Hanson smiled. "Class, this is Mr. Walker and his family. They're here as Ethan's guests." The weight on Ethan made a few kids swivel in their seats to look at him. For once, being noticed didn't feel like being targeted. Daniel gave the class a small nod, his eyes brushing over Ethan's face with a flash of quiet pride. "Morning," he said. "I'm Daniel. This is my wife, Emily, our son, Noah, and Max." At his name, Max's tail tapped once against the floor. Daniel kept things simple. He pointed to the patch on his sleeve, explaining it marked his unit, then to the flag, to the tapes on his chest. He told them about being infantry, basically the guys with heavy backpacks who walk everywhere, and got a laugh. Then he spoke about going into flooded towns, carrying people to safety during storms overseas, about friends who didn't all make it home. He didn't use the word dead. He didn't have to. The way his voice shifted, dropping lower, told the story anyway. He mentioned waking up at night to noises that weren't there, having to learn how to breathe through it, how to ask for help instead of pretending he was fine. The hardest part, he said, looking briefly at Noah, was remembering how to put the soldier away and be a dad. "My son doesn't need someone who knows how to kick down doors. He needs someone who knows how to sit on the floor and help with homework." Took me a while to figure that out. Emily stepped in next. She told them she was a nurse in the emergency department, that she saw everything from broken arms to heart attacks. She smiled as she described calming scared kids, then let that smile fall when she added, "Sometimes we see bruises that don't match the story, kids who fell off their bike in ways that don't make sense. Part of my job is to notice when something is wrong, even if nobody says it out loud." Her eyes slid, just for a heartbeat, toward Ethan's corner of the room before moving on. Then came Noah's big moment. Under Daniel's eye, he showed how Max would sit, lie down, and stay with a word or a hand signal. He explained in his serious 6-year-old voice that Max could help calm people who were scared, like him during thunderstorms. "He just lies on me," Noah said, patting Max's back, "and it feels like the scary stuff gets quieter." Max, as if to prove the point, wandered between desks afterward. When he reached Ethan's table, he paused, sniffed, then gently rested his big head against Ethan's knee. The kids nearest fell silent, watching. Ethan's hand moved on its own, sinking into warm fur. For a brief, shaky moment, the buzzing fear that usually lived under his skin dulled. When the questions finally dried up, Daniel looked around the room. "Most people think war is something that happens far away," he said quietly. "But sometimes it happens in houses that look normal from the outside. Places where a kid's heart races every time a key turns in the lock." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. No one whispered now. At his desk, Logan stared down at his hands, his face a shade paler. After the parents' talks and some applause, Mrs. Hanson dismissed the class for a short break. Kids spilled into the hallway, chattering. Ethan drifted out with them, but stayed near the window, looking back into room 207, where Daniel was coiling Max's leash and Emily was stacking some handouts she'd brought. For once, the idea of returning home that afternoon was not the only thing ahead of him. There was this morning, solid and real. As he watched, a woman stepped into the classroom. She looked to be in her 40s, with dark blonde hair cut in a chin-length bob that curved neatly under, tucked behind small gold hoops. Her skin was pale, with fine lines around her gray eyes that spoke of long days and heavier thoughts. She wore black slacks, flat shoes, and a muted green cardigan over a blouse, a laminated badge hanging from a lanyard. Karen Doyle, school social worker. "Mr. Walker," she said, voice calm but purposeful. "Do you have a moment?" Inside, Daniel straightened, Emily's attention turning toward the newcomer. Karen closed the door part way, lowering the classroom noise to a hum. "I'll be brief," she said. "We've had concerns about Ethan for a while now, bruises that repeat, changes in behavior. His teacher and the nurse have both documented things." Her eyes flicked toward the window where Ethan stood, then back. "After seeing how he connected with your family today, I need to ask something difficult. If things at home get worse and we need an emergency placement, would you consider being a temporary safe home for him?" The words hung in the air like a weight. On the other side of the glass, unaware of the conversation shaping around him, Ethan pressed his fingers to his dog tags and watched his borrowed family move around the room, feeling, for the first time in a long time, like he might belong somewhere, without realizing that belonging might soon mean leaving everything he'd ever known. Chapter 4. Facing the Dark. Violence, Courtrooms, and Ghosts of War. The video started as a joke at the bar. Someone slid a phone down the sticky counter toward Todd, the screen already playing. The place was dim, lit by neon beer signs and the bluish glow of a muted game on TV. Men in heavy jackets hunched over their drinks, the air thick with fried food and old resentment. Todd's cheeks were already flushed from cheap beer. His black hair stuck out messily, stubble shadowing his jaw. His blue eyes, once quick with charm, had gone flat and sour over the years. "Hey, Todd," a broad man with a red face and a trucker cap called out, breath smelling of onion rings and whiskey. "You seen this yet?" On screen, in grainy horizontal video, Ethan stood at the front of room 207. He wore his best t-shirt and that thrift store hoodie, but it was his expression that hurt the most. He was smiling, really smiling, dog tags shining against his chest. Beside him stood Daniel in his faded combat shirt, solid as a wall, while Max lay at their feet like a furry sentry. The kids in the background were leaning forward, enthralled. The caption above the video read, "Local veteran becomes dad for a day to bullied kid." The bar erupted in hoots. "Look at that," someone crowed. "Little guy traded up." Another voice chimed in, gleeful and cruel. "Here your boy found himself a real father figure, Todd. Army hero and a dog and everything. Got a sting, huh?" Todd's hand tightened around his beer bottle until his knuckles went white. Heat crawled up his neck, simmering into his ears. He watched Ethan's face on the tiny screen, watched the way the boy stood a little closer to Daniel than to the camera, how his shoulders looked looser, like he'd finally stopped waiting for something to hit him. Humiliation twisted in Todd's gut, quickly transforming into something uglier. In that noisy, stale bar, a story started writing itself in his head. They were stealing his authority, making him a joke. Ethan wasn't grateful. Ethan was making him look bad. By the time Todd stumbled out into the snow, the cold did nothing to sober him. The words from the bar replayed in his mind, mixing with old insecurities he worked hard, never to look at directly. Jobs lost, promises broken, Rachel's tired eyes when she thought he wasn't watching. His anger needed somewhere to go. It found the shape of a small boy with dog tags and a new soldier smiling at his side. That night, the snow fell thick and fast, muffling the city's usual sounds. Ethan's boots squeaked on the apartment stairs as he climbed, backpack heavy with homework he hadn't touched yet. His stomach nodded the way it always did when he reached the last flight, a subconscious bracing for whatever version of Todd waited on the other side of the door. The apartment felt wrong as soon as he stepped inside. The air was dense with stale beer, and something sharp underneath. Anger, like ozone before lightning. Empty cans littered the coffee table and the floor around it. The TV flickered silently, stuck on the paused frame of the career day video, Ethan's face frozen mid-smile beside Daniel and Max. Todd lounged on the couch, but his body was wired tight, one leg bouncing, jaw clenched. His eyes, bloodshot and cold, locked on Ethan the moment the door closed. "There he is," Todd said, dragging the words out. "Internet star." His laugh was devoid of humor. Ethan's heart sank. He recognized this Todd, the one who wanted a fight more than he wanted air. I didn't post that," Ethan said quickly. "Some parent—" "Shut up." Todd lurched to his feet. He wobbled for a moment, then steadied himself, fueled more by rage than balance. "You think you're better than me now? Going around collecting charity soldiers? Making me look like some deadbeat who doesn't exist?" His gaze dropped to the dog tags glinting at Ethan's chest. In 2 strides he was there, hand darting out. The chain bit into the back of Ethan's neck as Todd yanked, ripping the tags away. "You and this stupid piece of metal," Todd snarled, holding them up. "Always stroking it like it's gonna grow you a new daddy." He lifted his arm toward the small gas fireplace against the wall, flame already licking lazily behind the glass. Panic snapped something inside Ethan. He lunged, fingers scrabbling for the tags. "Don't," he yelped. "Please, those are all I have of him." Todd caught him by the front of his hoodie, hauling him up so his toes barely brushed the floor. His breath reeked of beer. His face was flushed too red, veins standing out at his temples. "I put a roof over your head," he hissed. "I feed you. I sit here every night in this dump instead of out enjoying myself. And you go on camera and pick some stranger over me?" His fist drew back. Ethan's world shrank to that hand, that arm, the familiar trajectory of pain. Somewhere, deep down, he wondered if this would be the time a bone finally snapped. The knock at the door came like a gunshot. Sharp, insistent. Todd froze mid-swing. For a heartbeat, no one moved. The knock came again, louder. And beneath it, through the thin apartment walls, Ethan heard a sound that made his skin prickle. A deep, unmistakable bark. "Max," Todd cursed under his breath and shoved Ethan away. The boy staggered, caught himself on the edge of the coffee table, and turned just as the apartment door opened. This time, Rachel had not given her key to a man who would hurt them. She had given it to people she hoped could save them. Daniel stepped in first, broad-shouldered and solid in his winter coat. Eyes swept the room in one practiced, assessing glance. Emily followed, her hospital badge tucked away now, face set in professional seriousness. Behind them came Karen Doyle in her green cardigan, clipboard hugged to her chest, and a uniformed police officer. A woman with dark, brown skin, hair pulled into a tight bun, her navy jacket zipped up over a bulletproof vest. Her name tag read, Officer J. Harris. Her brown eyes were clear and no nonsense, the eyes of someone who had seen scenes like this too many times. Rachel slipped in last, arms wrapped around herself, cheeks streaked with tears, her scrubs under her coat wrinkled from a double shift, and an emergency meeting that had finally broken her silence. "What the hell is this?" Todd barked, trying to puff himself up. "You can't just barge into my home." "It's not your name on the lease," and Karen said calmly, her voice steady as she opened her folder. "And we have a court order to conduct a welfare check on Ethan Miller." Officer Harris moved slightly to the side, putting herself between Todd and the others, stance relaxed but ready. "Sir," she said, tone clipped, "I need you to take a step back and keep your hands where I can see them." Max lay down at Daniel's heel, but his body was tense, ears forward, low growl vibrating just above silence. Ethan felt himself gravitate toward the dog, toward Daniel, like they were gravity and he was dust. Daniel's hand landed, warm and heavy, on his shoulder. Emily's eyes swept the room, taking in the empty cans, the fireplace, the discarded hoodie with stretched collar. "Ethan," Karen said gently, pulling out a small camera, "I'm going to ask you some questions, all right? And I'm going to need to take pictures of any bruises you have. You're not in trouble. Do you understand?" Ethan nodded, throat tight. He sounded far away as he answered her questions. Yes, Todd hit him. Yes, it had happened more than once. Yes, he was scared most nights. Karen's pen scratched across her forms, her gray eyes soft but focused. Officer Harris cuffed Todd when he tried to push past her, his protests turning into shouted accusations. Rachel was lying, the kid bruised easy, everyone was exaggerating. His words bounced off the growing wall of evidence. Photos from the school nurse, testimony from Mrs. Hanson, Emily's observations, now Karen's report. Rachel's voice shook when she finally spoke. "I should have stopped this sooner," she choked out. "I was so tired, and he kept promising, but I can't let him touch my son again." When it was over, when Todd had been let out into the snow still cursing, when the fireplace was empty of dog tags and only held flames, Karen knelt beside Ethan. "Tonight," she said, "you won't be staying here. Until the court makes a decision, you're going to live with the Walkers. You know them. You're safe there. Your mom will visit. This is not your fault." The words felt unreal, like lines in a play he hadn't agreed to be in. He watched as Rachel packed a small duffel with trembling hands. 2 changes of clothes, his worn superhero t-shirt, a book, the folded memorial program with his father's face. She pressed it into his arms and hugged him so tightly he could barely breathe. "I'll fix this," she whispered into his hair. "I promise you, Ethan, I'm going to fix it." That night, in the small guest room at the Walker's house, Ethan lay under a thick comforter that smelled faintly of detergent and something like cedar. The house creaked softly around him, the unfamiliar sounds of someone else's home. Down the hall, he heard Daniel shout, a raw, wordless sound that made Ethan jolt upright. For a moment, he was back in his own apartment, expecting Todd's footsteps. Instead, he heard Emily's voice, low and soothing, and Max's nails on the hardwood, then a high, distressed whine. Ethan cracked his door open. Down the hall, in the dim light spilling from the master bedroom, he saw Daniel sitting on the edge of the bed, chest heaving, sweat darkening his t-shirt. His eyes were unfocused, haunted by something only he could see. Max had clambered half onto his lap, pressing his weight against Daniel's chest, head tucked under his chin. Emily sat beside them, one hand on Daniel's shoulder, talking softly. "You're home, Danny. It's the bedroom. It's winter, not the desert. Breathe with me." Ethan watched, heart pounding for a different reason now. Adults weren't supposed to be afraid. Yet here was Daniel, the man who'd stood like a wall in his classroom, shaking in the dark. Ethan understood, suddenly and fiercely, that the war in Daniel's life hadn't ended when he left the sand and came back to snow. The next week moved in a blur of meetings and paperwork. On the morning of the hearing, the snow had thinned to flurries, but the sky remained a solid gray lid. The courthouse was all hard lines and polished stone, metal detectors and echoes. Ethan sat on a wooden bench outside the family courtroom, wearing a borrowed button-down shirt that felt too stiff. Rachel sat beside him, in her best jeans and a blouse he barely recognized, her hair brushed down for once, hands twisting in her lap. Across from them, Daniel and Emily sat close together, both in clean, simple clothes, looking both out of place and exactly right. A thin man with graying hair and a cheap suit, Mr. Klein, the legal aid lawyer assigned to their case, spoke quietly to Rachel, his voice patient. Inside the courtroom, the judge was an older man with thinning white hair and dark, deep-set eyes behind rectangular glasses. His black robe hung heavily from narrow shoulders. His face was lined, but there was nothing soft in it. He'd heard every version of this story before. They all stood when he entered, then sat at his gesture. Ethan's voice shook as he answered questions, but he answered them. He told the judge about dropped beer cans and fists, about words that hurt more than bruises, about counting the seconds between the sound of a key in the lock and the first yell. Rachel's voice quivered as she admitted she'd looked away too long, begged the court to let her prove she could keep her son safe now. She promised therapy, support groups, cutting all ties with Todd. Daniel spoke plainly about what he had seen in that living room. Emily talked about the medical patterns that matched Ethan's story. Karen outlined the school's reports. Todd, in handcuffs and county orange, tried to bluster, but his words only made the judge's mouth grow tighter. Finally, the courtroom fell quiet. The judge shuffled the stack of documents before him, then looked over the tops of his glasses at Ethan, at Rachel, at the Walkers. For a moment, the only sound was the soft hiss of the heating system. "Regarding temporary custody," he began slowly, "and the petition for an emergency protective order," his gavel lifted, then paused in the air, hanging there like a held breath as the scene cut away. The words that would reshape Ethan's world held just out of reach. Chapter 5. A Chosen Family. As winter thaws, the gavel came down with a sharp, sure crack that echoed through the courtroom like breaking ice. Regarding temporary custody and the emergency protective order, the judge said, voice steady, this court grants full custody of Ethan Miller to his mother, Rachel Miller, under the condition that she enroll in and complete a domestic violence survivor program and participate in ongoing therapy. A restraining order is issued against Todd Harris. He is prohibited from any contact with Ethan or Ms. Miller, direct or indirect, until further review by this court. Supervised visitation may be considered in the distant future, depending on his compliance with mandated treatment and the absence of further incidents. He tapped the file once, a final punctuation. For the time being, the Walker family is formally recognized as a support placement. Ethan may spend nights there as needed, at the discretion of his mother and his social worker. This case remains under active review. The words settled over Ethan like a heavy blanket. Not punishment, not exactly relief, more like a line finely drawn in the snow. Rachel's shoulders sagged, a long-held breath leaving her, as silent tears slid down her cheeks. At his side, Daniel's hand rested lightly on Ethan's back, solid and unobtrusive, while Emily gave a tiny nod, as if ticking off one step in a long treatment plan. Outside the courthouse, the winter light was thin, but brighter than it had been in weeks. Snowbanks lined the sidewalks in gray-streaked heaps, but the air held the faintest hint of something else. Wet concrete, exposed earth, a season thinking about changing its mind. Karen shook Rachel's hand, reminding her about group sessions and counseling appointments. Mr. Klein tucked away his worn briefcase with a tired but satisfied smile. "It's not the end," he said quietly to Ethan as they parted, "but it's a better start." Life after court didn't magically smooth out. Trauma didn't pack its bags just because a document was signed, but the days began to rearrange themselves around a new set of rules. The Walker house became the second address in Ethan's heart, as familiar as his own. Some nights, after a hard day or when memories felt too loud in the dark, Rachel would look at her son's face, see the tightness back in his jaw, and say softly, "Pack a bag, honey. How about a night at Daniel and Emily's?" No one took offense. That was the arrangement. At the Walker home, the front door was never locked against him. Ethan did homework at the kitchen table, the wooden surface scarred by years of meals and school projects. Emily moved around the small kitchen in navy scrubs or sweatpants, cooking something simple, pasta, soup, tacos, while Noah zoomed action figures along the edge of the table, making whoosh noises, occasionally stopping to ask Ethan how to spell a new superhero name. Max took up his usual post under the table, a big, patient shadow, sometimes nudging Ethan's knee when he shifted too fast, as if reminding him that someone was keeping watch. Daniel, when he was home before bedtime, split his time between helping Noah with a lopsided Lego structure and leaning over Ethan's math problems, his brow furrowed in the same concentration he once gave to maps. "Life is a lot of numbers and angles, kid," he'd say, tapping a pencil on the page. "You learn how to read them, they stop feeling like they're out to get you." At Rachel's apartment, changes were slower but real. A new lock on the door. Todd's things gone, leaving awkward empty patches on shelves that would later be filled by plants and framed photos. Rachel's eyes were still tired, but it was a different kind of tired, the exhaustion of someone fighting to get better, not someone trying to survive another night. She began group sessions in a beige room, with other women who spoke in halting voices about fists and fear, and the strange loyalty that keeps you tied to those who hurt you. She came home with brochures and handouts, but also with small sparks in her words. "My counselor says I can't undo the past, but I can build something different now, for both of us." On her day off, a rare, precious thing, Rachel cleared a space on the living room wall. She rehung the photo of James Miller, his uniform crisp, his smile somewhat shy, then placed a new frame beside it. In that photo, Ethan stood in the center of the Walker's small yard, one arm around Noah's narrow shoulders, the other resting on Max's head. Daniel and Emily flanked them, slightly awkward in front of the camera, but smiling in a way that didn't look forced. Ethan's own smile wasn't huge, but there was light in it, and his shoulders were no longer folded in on themselves. The season shifted by inches. Snowbanks shrank to grimy slush. Then one day, the grass beneath them began to show through in thin green stripes. At the Walker house, Daniel dragged scrap lumber from the garage and announced a project. "Every home needs more shelves," he said. "You want to learn to build something that stays put, kid?" Ethan learned to measure twice and cut once, to sand with the grain, to sink screws straight. His small hands grew steadier on the drill. They stained the finished bookshelf, a warm honey brown, and loaded it into Daniel's pickup. At Rachel's apartment, they installed it together under the living room window. Ethan arranged books on it, secondhand adventure novels, a few library finds, the framed program from his father's memorial, propped carefully on the top shelf. Rachel ran her fingers along the smooth edge. "You built this," she said, wonder in her voice. "You and Daniel." "Mostly Daniel," Ethan admitted. "I just didn't screw it up." "You helped make space," she said, more serious now. "That's a big deal." At school, the snow melted off the playground, leaving behind puddles and patches of mud. Logan moved more quietly these days. The day after the hearing, Ethan had seen him outside the supermarket, standing stiffly near a luxury SUV while Mark argued on the phone, voice rising, eyes glazed. A bottle-shaped shadow lay hidden in a grocery bag on the passenger seat. Logan's face had been pale, jaw clenched with a shame Ethan recognized too well. A week later, on an afternoon when snow fell in soft, reluctant flakes, Logan appeared at the Walker's back gate, hands buried in the pockets of his puffer jacket, cheeks red from cold and nerves. In the yard, Ethan was laughing as Max leaped to catch a bright orange frisbee Daniel had just thrown. Daniel saw Logan first. He straightened, assessing, then nodded once to Ethan and made an excuse to go check something in the garage, giving them space. Logan stayed at the edge of the yard, boots leaving nervous divots in the thawing ground. "Hey," he said, voice cracking just slightly. Ethan dropped the frisbee to his side. "Hey." Max trotted between them, tail wagging in an easy neutral rhythm, as if he refused to pick sides. Logan swallowed, the words fighting their way out past old pride. "I, saw you at court," he blurted. "My dad had a case there that day. I saw you with your mom and the Walkers." He stared at his shoes. "I heard what you said, to the judge." Ethan's chest tightened. He hadn't realized anyone from school had been there. The idea made his skin prickle, but there was something in Logan's tone. No mockery, just rawness. "I shouldn't have..." Logan's breath fogged the air as he struggled. "The things I called you. Trash. Orphan. I thought making you smaller would make me feel bigger. Turns out it just makes me look like him when he's drunk." His mouth twisted, the admission tearing at something brittle inside him. Silence stretched. Ethan turned the frisbee over in his hands, feeling the rough edge where Max's teeth had chewed it. He thought of cold hallway floors, of dog tags and dirty puddles, of all the times he'd wished someone had thrown him a lifeline instead of a new insult. Daniel's voice echoed from a recent conversation in the garage. "You can't rewrite what happened, kid, but you get to decide what you do with the next throw." Without a speech or a grand gesture, Ethan flicked his wrist and sent the frisbee skimming toward Logan. "Try it," he said. Logan caught it clumsily, surprise knocking some of the tension from his shoulders. "Daniel says," Ethan added, forcing himself to hold the other boy's gaze, "we can learn to throw our lives in a different direction, if we want." For the first time since Ethan had known him, Logan's smile looked small and real, not performed. "Maybe I could start by not being a jerk," he said. "It's a start," Ethan agreed. The days lengthened. The sun lingered longer over the city, turning snow to rivulets, rivulets to damp earth, earth to soft, green promise. One afternoon, the sky startlingly blue, Daniel appeared in the doorway holding something folded over his arm, a new hoodie in a deep, calm blue. "For you," he said, tossing it lightly to Ethan. The front was printed with simple white letters. "Not all warriors carry weapons. Some carry children out of the dark." Ethan traced the words with his thumb, throat tight. "This is a little cheesy," he said, but his voice shook. "And kind of awesome." He pulled it on. It fit perfectly, warm without feeling heavy. "You know," he added, half laughing, "I guess I have two dads now, one up there." He tipped his head toward the sky. "And one under this roof." Daniel looked away for a second, blinking, then shook his head. "Careful," he said gruffly. "You're going to give a guy a reputation." From the kitchen, Emily's voice floated out, playful. "And what about moms?" she called. "Because I'm pretty sure I just got promoted to bonus parent." Ethan grinned. "Guess we're all collecting extra family," he said. "Mom gets you two, I get all of you. Noah gets someone to make sure Max doesn't eat his homework." In the yard, patches of grass shone bright and new between the last stubborn islands of snow. Ethan, Noah, and Max tore across it in chaotic circles, frisbee sailing, laughter chasing after it. Max bounded after the disc, jaws snapping shut around it with unbothered joy, then trotted back to drop it at whichever boy seemed to need it most. From the porch, Daniel leaned against the rail, Emily at his side, their shoulders touching. They watched as Ethan stumbled and then righted himself, as Noah shrieked with glee, as Max barked into the clear air. The battlefield in Ethan's life hadn't vanished. Scars didn't evaporate with spring. But the front line had shifted, drawn now around a small group of people who had chosen him, who would stand between him and the worst of the world whenever they could. Somewhere, in another town, under another heavy winter sky, there might be another child standing in the snow, staring at a stranger's door, hand raised to knock. The question would be the same, small, hoarse, and enormous at once. Can you help me? The answer, if given with presences instead of excuses, with open doors, outstretched hands, and the patient work of healing, would never be small. It could tilt an entire life toward the light. Sometimes God's miracles don't come with thunder and bright light. They look like a stranger opening their door, a tired nurse noticing a bruise, a veteran who refuses to walk away, a dog lying in front of a scared child like a living shield. In our ordinary days, going to work, paying bills, feeling exhausted, we might be the answer to a silent prayer. Maybe today you are the one who can open a door, listen to a child, or stand beside someone who is afraid. You don't have to save the whole world. For one person, your kindness can be the miracle. If Ethan's story and the Walker family touched your heart, share this video so hope can travel a little further. Comment your thoughts or your own story of being pulled out of the dark. Subscribe to the channel so we can keep walking together through more stories of courage, faith, and second chances. And let me leave you with a short prayer for everyone watching. Lord, bless each person hearing this story. If they are hurting, send someone to open a door for them. If they are safe, make them brave enough to be a shelter for others. Protect the children who are afraid, strengthen the parents who are trying, and teach us all to be your hands in a broken world. Amen. Remember, it is never too late to become someone's small miracle. One, I'm here, I'll help, can change an entire life, just like it did for Ethan on that winter day.